Okay, everybody see my desktop?
Yep.
All right. Well, let me start out by introducing myself. I'm Jeff Roble. I'm the applications engineer here for Spectrum Controls. I handle most, if not all, of the technical support, I guess, when I'm out of town. That's about the only time that somebody else might take the phone call. So I guess I'd get started here with just following Tom's overview. We'll start with just a quick kind of overview of the comms module, and I thought the best way to do that would be just to list some bulleted items that that just came to mind that I think are the most obvious differences between our comms module and the existing Rockwell comms module. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up just a tech doc, and I apologize if it seems low tech here, but and we're going to just, right after this, kind of just dive right into the UI and looking at a photo of the PCB and just kind of get an idea of where things are on the circuit board and all of that. So for starts, the comms module is built on a Linux operating system, which gives us the flexibility of adding features pretty rapidly to the device. But at the same time, it also takes longer for the unit to boot up. So some of you that may have had a chance to look at the new comms module may have noticed that it takes about 2 minutes for the thing to boot up. And unfortunately, we didn't do a very good job with the LED status LEDs on the box as an indicator as to when the box is fully booted up. So just an FYI, we'll come back to that. Another obvious difference is that we have 2 Ethernet ports on the Inview comms, one that's dedicated for a local area network connection and one that's dedicated for a wide area network connection, mainly because down the road we plan on adding some advanced routing features and the possibility of sending out notifications via email and that sort of thing. So right now we're not really using both ports, although both ports are active. But typically I suggest that the customer use the wide area network port just in case they're behind a gateway and need to get out. So to minimize confusion, we usually push them to using just the WAN interface. Secondly, there's no special software required, unlike the older comms module. All that's required for us is just a web browser. There's also no need for RS links or EDS files. We've had some customers call us and indicating that the thing comes up as unknown device, which it will because we don't have an EDS file. But basically, it's not required, so there's really no need for RS links as far as we're concerned regarding the comms module. The module actually can be configured for both 5 and 24 volts DC. So, for example, the old P22R display required a 24 volt DC power, and so that's switchable on the circuit board. So we have all of the various models. We kind of try to follow the Rockwell model number convention. We just kind of added an SC at the end and a 2 to indicate that it's a next generation comms module. But as far as the hardware itself, the circuit board, it's the same across all the platforms. The board is pre-configured at the factory for 5 or 24 volts, depending on the comms module type. In other words, if it's a K versus a P, the voltage setting would be set at the factory. We also added a feature that allows us to, if it's connected to the sign, the user can press the reset button on the circuit board momentarily, and it will display the local IP address. Of course, when the thing leaves the factory, it's set with a static IP address, the WAN interface that is, with a 192.168.1.100 address. And then we chose the 1.100 just because we were concerned with the possibility of the comms module happen to be sharing the same IP addresses as a gateway if it was sitting behind a gateway. So that's why we chose the 100. We can also reset the box back to factory defaults if need be by holding down the reset button for 15 seconds. The box also allows us to import character files, which are the bitmaps, and message files from the old IMS software. So if a customer has those files already put together, they can import those directly into the comms module without having to recreate them. Any questions so far? Okay. Next, I'll go to the PCB, a photo of the PCB layout, so we can just get an idea of where things are located on the circuit board. So first off, you'll see in the bottom left-hand corner the reset button. And the reset button is closest to the local area network Ethernet port. And again, this one we're not really using right now. I mean, it is active. The customer can configure it, but we point them away from it, usually just to avoid confusion, because we've had customers accidentally set both the LAN and the WAN interface to the same IP range and basically create a routing conflict on the box. So to avoid that, until we add those more advanced features, we point them to the wide area network interface, which is the one furthest from the reset button, and labeled Ethernet 1 on this silk screen. You can actually, might be able to make it out. It's a little blurry. And so the WAN port is here. The blue connector in the upper right-hand corner is where the power comes in, and it can be switched between 5 and 24 volts. So it starts with pin 1 is the 24-volt pin, pin 2 is 5. The third pin is the ground, and then frame ground is the last pin. And the power is switched using a circuit board jumper here. You could see it's just below the blue connector here, or I should say between the blue connector and the green connector. And then we have the two LED statuses, lights, and we can cover the LED blink codes in a little bit here. To be honest, they're not very useful. We do have plans to change the behavior down the road, but for now they don't give the user a whole lot of info. Secondly, the serial connection is actually this green connector here, and depending on the model, you know, there'll be different cables. For example, the P will have a DB9 connector on one end, and the other comms modules will just have a pigtail. And those cables will already be pre-installed on the circuit board when it ships from the factory. Okay.
Jeff, I have a question for you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Since you showed the board, and we used to use a lot of troubleshooting with the old board, I've played with this thing a little bit, and the reset button I find does not work. You know, one time I lost my IP address. I must have pressed that thing for 20 seconds, but still somehow miraculously came back to my old IP address and got it to work. But I never went back to 192.168.1.100. Is there any light indication telling me that, hey, I did officially do a reset, or you were saying the lights are not that valuable?
There is, but it's a bit tricky. I've run into the same scenario myself, and again, going back to the fact that the thing is a Linux box is kind of part of the problem, because depending on how long it's been running, you know, if the user were to, for example, to just power cycle it. If they don't wait the full 2 minutes, the box won't be ready, and if you hold that button down, it will do nothing.
Okay.
So, and I've even found cases where even after it's been running, you hold the button down, and you'll get this kind of rapid blink on one of the lights, and it stays indefinitely. And the thought there is that the box may be performing some operation at that time. So what I found just by trial and error is it responds best to a reset after a reboot. So you power cycle the box, you wait the 2 minutes. At the end of the 2 minutes, you hold the button down for 15 seconds, release. What you should see, I believe it's LED 1 will give you a rapid blink and then instantly go away, and then you'll only have the green LED, which is on solid, which is the LED 2, which on this image here would be the one closest to the blue connector, will be on solid. And at that point, the box is actually resetting itself to factory defaults. And if you wait again the additional 2 minutes for it to reboot, you should be able to connect to the WAN interface using the default IP address, which is the 192.168.1.100. But yeah, I agree. It's a bit tricky. I'm not sure why. I know the LEDs are controlled by the FPGA, and I believe the push button is also controlled by an FPGA, and there may be some handshaking there that's not quite right, or timing that's not quite right, that would cause that behavior. So not to beat the dead horse here, but starting with 1.03, I have made a request to change the LED behavior for one, and to have them revisit the reset button. So all I can say is it does work, but it's a bit tricky. If you follow that process, I've had pretty good success in resetting. I can't think of a case where I wasn't able to reset it to factory defaults. It's
okay,
just,
and there was no light indication whether we could wait the 2 minutes, but if there was a light indication or any light indication after the 2 minutes, hey, we're up and running here.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just get, hey, just wait 2 minutes.
Right. Unfortunately, like I said, we didn't do a good job with the LEDs. I think they tried initially trying to follow the behavior with the old comms module, and it just kind of fell down from there. It just got, yeah. The LED behavior is definitely different than the old comms module, and like I said, it's not very useful. So exactly, I mean, 1.03, we're going to change that LED behavior, give the customer an indication as to when the box is fully booted. But for now, we kind of just have to deal with it, unfortunately, and it does make it more difficult to troubleshoot a reset over the phone. I've already been there, done that. So.
Well, the other thing is, it would be nice is that the LED on our old box, I can troubleshoot right off the bat. Hey, is the LED blinking or not blinking? Meaning I'm communicating to that processor, or I'm not communicating to the processor, because it's like a panel view polling. And this one seems like it has the very similar format. So I could already my troubleshooting split in half. Do you got the LED blinking, or the LED not, or is it solid? So I know which direction to go to. That would be a nice future feature in the LED status, because I use that all the time in troubleshooting, especially when these guys, you have the wiring. Someone messed up on I've seen wiring messed up on our old boxes, even out of manufacturing. It helps us out here.
Yeah, exactly. I agree 100%. Yeah. I guess since we're talking about LEDs, why don't I just go ahead and bring up the LED blink codes here. Hopefully you can read that. And they're kind of oriented, if we go back to the image here. And I know it's blurry. I apologize for that. But this one here that I have the cursor on is the LED 2, and the one just below it's the LED 1. And let me go back to the text doc. So the LED 2, comes up green when the minute you power the box up. So the request I made in to the software guys for 1.03 is to have that light blink green while it's booting and then go solid green when the thing is fully booted. And then use the other LED to indicate communication with the PLC. So that's the plan, and hopefully with 1.03 we'll get there. It shouldn't be that difficult. They're, like I said, they are controlled with an FPGA, so adding and changing the functionality shouldn't be a problem. And that, of course, when we do make that leap, those updates will take place with a standard firmware update, which the user can do in the field. So, okay. So let's see, what's next on my list here?
The only thing I would say here is that,
sure,
at least what I've seen on our panel views, they're really only information is going to it. They're only a receiver. So these
right.
LED statuses, LED 1 is good, but I'd rather know, hey, the better one is, am I talking to the processor? I want to know if, hey, I'm pulling the processor and getting the tags that I defined in my software.
Exactly.
LED 1, it just shows that, hey, I'm downloading to the display. Okay, there's not really back and forth communications there. As much
right.
as
I don't know why they have the red blinking. That should never happen because the sign doesn't communicate back with us, at least for the time being. So, that may change down the road when we change the functionality of the signs. When and if we get to that point, of course, we'll make those changes. Okay, so next thing I wanted to look at was just the wiring, and we do have a quick start guide that will be accompanying the box that will be shipped with the box, starting with the 1.02 build. So this is the quick start guide, and it basically calls out the cabling and wiring for the major display types, and also calls out the default WAN IP. And again, we suggest that in the document we suggest that the user use the WAN interface. So here we see the P22R, the breakout for adding the 24-volt DC external supply, and the DB9 cable, and how the PLC ties into all of this. And very similar for the P4. As far as the wiring, the signs haven't changed, at least not yet. So the terminal wiring on the display is basically the same, although our wiring colors are different, and we wanted to try to stick with the same colors, but it turns out that doing that we would have to have the custom cables made, and it would have cost a small fortune for us to have those cables made. So we made the decision to just change the color coding here. So let me zoom in on this a bit and point out just a couple things here. So first thing, you'll notice that we have a separate ground for signal and a separate ground for power. So instead of tying in one ground cable wire, we have two. We also have a chassis ground, which we tie into the main power lug going into the display. And this same kind of wiring configuration is similar across the board. The only exception would be the P9 and the P display, the 22R display, where we have a DB9 cable for the 22R. You just plug it in, and of course the external power supply. Let me go back. Again, P7, same wiring as the P4. And then the P9, simply because the motherboard's is different. However, you know, it's in a different place, but the wiring is still the same pinout, same colors. And you know, one of the things that it's very easy to detect a wiring issue with the new comms module, simply because you can go in and you know, fire off your web browser, and you can actually trigger a message from the display. And I'm sure most of you have had a chance to do that. And if the display doesn't update, then obviously the first thing to look at would be the wiring. So anyway, any questions about the wiring? Okay. So next, I think we'll just, I guess I could finish off with the remaining steps here on the quick start guide, just so you know what the customer will be getting. So you know, we tell them how to log into the box initially, and we tell them where to change the WAN settings, and then how to configure the PLC and the tags for the controller. And then we finally point them to our website where they can download the add-on instructions if they're using the ControlLogix and CompactLogix controllers. The add-on instructions are still the ones created by Rockwell. As far as communication between the new comms module and the PLC, that really hasn't changed. It's just the user interface to the box, and is really the main difference between our solution and the Rockwell solution, the original Rockwell solution. Okay, so I guess I'll just pull up a browser now, and we can okay, so I have one here on the network that's connected to a P9. Okay, default password Spectrum, all lowercase. However, in this case, I did change it because I didn't want anybody interrupting us while we were doing the training here. Okay, so first place, if they were following the quick start guide, we would point them to, again, we want them to use the WAN interface. We would have them click on the network button here on the WAN and have them set the IP address for the comms module so that it'll match their PLC network. Now, the one thing with version firmware, I believe even up to 1.01, they have to enter a gateway address. We force that here. This box is actually running 1.02, and you can see we changed that from a required field to an optional field. But if they're running the older firmware, they'll have to enter that in. And if there is no gateway, it really doesn't matter. You can pretty much enter anything as long as they don't step out. The box doesn't step outside the local subnet. The gateway will never be used. And DNS, again, not really used by the box. Again, these are things that are going to make more sense down the road when we start rolling in email notification and that sort of thing.
Hey, Jeff. Hey, Jeff, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
This is Tim Brzanko.
Hi, Tim.
I've been just a couple minutes late, but how can I tell what firmware is in that card right now? Can I do it?
Yeah, I think there's a couple places. The easiest way is just on any of the UI screens. If you right mouse click, you'll get this little pop-up menu that appears, and then just click the About in view, and that will give you the current release version.
Very good, thanks.
Oh, yeah, along with a serial number and model. And again, the serial and model, of course, are set at the factory. And again, the boxes are firmware upgradable in the field, so as we release new builds, the user will be able to upgrade the module if need be. Okay, so this other side's grayed out. We don't allow the user to change the port settings on the box. That may change down the road, but for now that's grayed out, locked out from the user being able to change that. Okay, and then next step they would go is to actually set up the PLC. And I already have one on the network here. It's a Control-Logix, L73 to be exact. So I've set up an IP address here. We do allow them to change the port number. However, this is something in case Rockwell down the road decides to allow the user to change the port number. I don't think that will ever happen, but if it does, we added that capability. Slot position, this is the slot position of the controller itself, not of the Ethernet bridge. Okay? And with the 1.02 firmware, which is what I'm running, we give the user the ability to disable or enable polling. On the older firmware builds, it's turned on all the time. So the only drawback with that is if the controller's not there, the error log is going to just grow because it's generating errors because the controller's not connected. The test device connection is simply just kind of a ping test, and should come back with success if the PLC is connected, and it did. And the other side of this web page is for the LAN settings. Now, again, since we're pointing them to use the WAN port, I just have them leave it at the defaults, which defaults it's set to act as a DHCP client. So, again, the port is active. If they wanted to set it up, as long as they understand that you can't set the WAN and the LAN to the same subnet, and as long as they plug into the correct port, it will work either way that they choose. Again, the reason we wanted them to go with the WAN side is because if the box happened to be behind a gateway, it's just a lot less things to worry about. Again, I had a lot of cases where the user was confused by the two interfaces and then ended up setting them to the same subnet, which of course causes issues with routing. In fact, it can even cause it to where the user cannot even log into the box locally, in which case they would have to do a factory reset to gain control again. Okay.
Now I have one more question. This test device connection button, is it just pinging the device or testing also the tags that were defined?
No, it's just a ping. It's just a ping.
It's just a ping, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just kind of a reality check, is the device there, sort of thing. It'd be nice if it also checked the tags, but maybe that's a good feature to add. Maybe I'll have them add that. Okay, so let's go back to the configuration. Another thing you can see here are the LAN and WAN, current LAN and WAN IP settings, currently defined on the box. It's set up. Again, the LAN set up for DHCP, nothing connected to the port, so of course it comes back with nothing. And then the blue question mark button is the online help. Okay, let's go. Next would be we would have them go to the message server, and this may look a little bit different from the version of firmware that you're running on your units there. And when the 1.02 formally releases, I'll send you the firmware update so you can update the box. But here you can see I've defined some tags, and I'm following the examples that were defined by Rockwell as far as the add-on instruction examples. I'm following the same kind of tag names and that. But of course, they can change that to whatever they like. But here you can see the trigger address and the variable trigger address, and then the offset for the start of the data, and then we have to define the array size. So it's similar to what they had to do with the original comms. Hasn't changed much. But again, between the two firmware builds, there might be some subtle differences in the layout here on this screen. Okay, next, after they set up the controller and define the tags, they would more than likely select their display type. So they would go to the display manager. Here I've already added one for P94. You can add more displays. This is kind of a carryover of the IMS software, but it's a bit different because really the only way we can have multiple displays connected to one comms module would be over a serial connection. So they would have to have the displays configured for RS-485, and this would give them the ability to broadcast or download to a handful of displays on the serial network. I don't personally think that will be used very often. More than likely the customer will have just the one display defined, and that's all that they'll ever use. Whereas the old IMS software, since it was decoupled from the comms module itself, you could have multiple comms modules on an Ethernet network and configure them one at a time, or 3 or 4 all at the same time with the same message file. Well, the only way we can do that is if they're connected serially. So just if we were going to add one, the interface is really simple. Give the device, or excuse me, the display type a name, select the display type, serial address, and this is where you can turn the heartbeat on, just like you could with the old comms module. Once the display is defined, they would then go to the message manager. And here you can see that we have several message groups already defined. This is the one we're going to use today for training here. Let me pull up. Let's go into the actual message editor first. So let me just double click on the message. So we try to follow the IMS software as far as the layout and the WYSIWYG tool. There are some subtle differences. For example, when you enter a message here, it's not necessarily going to look like what you would see on the display. To actually see what's going to appear on the display, you're going to want to use the preview button. And obviously you can see there's some difference in spacing and the size of the fonts and that sort of thing. And then if it was a rotating message, you could also click the play button and it would rotate just like the old software. And then of course we can go back to the edit. As far as, why don't we just add a new message here. So just like the old, you type in what you want, you select the font you want, no secrets. If you want to insert a variable, you select the variable type, whether numeric or alphanumeric. Select the ID. Now with the alphanumeric, the way they labeled the text length is a bit confusing. This really is the maximum character size. I don't know why they call it minimum text length. Just would make more sense to call it maximum character length. Like the old software. I don't know why we had to be different, but regardless, the functionality is exactly the same as the old. Submit. And again, changing colors, same deal. And we still have the same style format, standard, bold, wide. Blinking, let's see, extended ASCII characters if they want to use Greek. You can insert date and time just like you could with the old. Insert custom characters. We can also do that. by clicking this guy. And I'd say the only thing that's a bit different is how the custom characters displayed on the message editor. So let me just grab one here. I'm going to grab a $sign here. Whoops. Now in the editor, it's just going to show up as this star glyph. But if you hover over it, you can see kind of a little pop-up of it. Might be hard to make out over the WebEx, but you can see it when you hover over it. The difficulty here is if you got a long string of characters, you can't really tell what it is until you hit the preview. Then it shows up under the preview. So, and I think the reason they went that direction was some limitations with Flash. For whatever reason, they had difficulty showing everything in the one window. So anyway, any questions about the editor? I mean, this should look pretty close to what you're used to as far as where things are and what they're called. We tried to mimic the existing software as much as possible. Okay, one difference here at the bottom. Here's where you can actually trigger. You can add messages to the queue. You can trigger a priority message, remove messages from the queue. You can do that all from this interface, along with, of course, downloading to the display. So if I wanted to download this particular message group, hit the download button. Just waiting for it here. Select the display and click the submit button. And the only thing that would have been nice is to have some kind of indication that it's downloaded to the display. And it definitely did. It's just there's no prompt or pop-up box to the user that the download actually went through. So that's something that's on the list of things we want to add. We just don't have it yet. So here I just downloaded it. Let me load I have a camera here.
I'm surprised you would have to then do some firmware into the Inview, because usually it's the same way. When we download in the old ones, we had to, hey, is the monitor scrambling a little bit, or does it say download? Since there was no receive line coming back, there's nothing for you to capture.
Exactly. But I mean, just for the user interface alone, though, it would have been nice if it just said download complete, or not download complete, but that it sent the download. You click the button and nothing happens, but it is going on in the background. So if I bring, but you're exactly right. There's no response from the display. There's no feedback from the display, which that's definitely something we're going to add down the road. But first things first was to redesign the comms module, which was definitely a large endeavor, and it took us some time to do that. The next step, of course, will be to try to change the protocol on the displays and make it more modern, I guess. So I'm going to go ahead and
I have a question here on you brought up a thing in the configuration to the controller of polling and non-polling. Are you going to go into that a little bit also? Usually we're used to always polling. It's always polling the tags. Well, if it was non-polling, how do I know the controller changed at all?
Well, what we mean by non-polling, in other words, basically it's just an on-off. Either the thing's reading the controller or it's not. The reason they added that was simply because if it wasn't polling the controller, what we would find is that the comms module would be generating a lot of error messages, which is fine, but at the same time, we're basically pushing all of this data to a file. So this gives the user the ability to momentarily sever the connection between the PLC and the comms module. So that's what we mean by polling. Does that make sense?
So in this case here, really that benefit is if I had the comm module without the Inview or the processor, this would be a nice feature. But if I don't, make sure it's always polling, because if he does not ever check polling, well, then he says, why don't I trigger my messages? We got to have to be careful about that feature now.
That is true, and again, depending on what version of firmware, if they're running the 1.01 or earlier, that option doesn't exist. So that was something they added with the 1.02. So here you can see the camera view of some displays that we have hanging on a wall. So I just downloaded to the top one, which is the P94C. So let's go ahead and just try triggering some messages so we can then we go back to the live view. Ta-da. One other thing that we just added with 1.02 that I thought was pretty cool is not only can we trigger messages from the user interface, but we can also change the variables too. So it gives a good way for the user to test their messages before they even have a PLC connected. So let me trigger this message here. And I think I already have a value stored in the variable. Yeah, this is a test, but now if we wanted to change that, unfortunately they didn't put it on the screen, but you can go back to the configuration, go to Tools, and trigger variable update. And let's select the display. It's an alphanumerical, variable ID was 0. Fat-fingered it here. All right, overruled. And then we go back to the display. And there you go. So that gives that was something they just added with 1.02. So that's the 1.02. I don't know if I mentioned, but that should be releasing within the next week or two. So that will be available to everyone. Okay, so let's see. We went through the message editor. Let's take a look at where you find the import utilities. So here's where we would import messages from an existing, from the old IMS software or from the next-gen comms module. They are stored as different file types. Importing, you can import the IVL and the IVP files. IVP, I believe, is the message. IVL is the character files. You can also export from the comms module. The format will be or the extension will be SIM, which is a format that can only be read by the next-gen comms module. But it gives you a way to back it up. And you can also back up the entire configuration by doing a backup and restore here as well. This is also where you find the update firmware button. Click on the update firmware and then browse to wherever the firmware file is at, and then it does the rest. It's pretty simple. You can also reset to factory defaults or perform a soft reboot from the screen. Let's see here. Security, that's just basically the interface for changing the password. Nothing too crazy there. Diagnostics, this is just kind of a snapshot of the system as a whole, as far as what services are running and available CPU and memory and that. So here you can see we're pretty much not even using it. Serial ports, this is probably something they'll rarely change, but if they were going to use RS-485, then of course we would have to select RS-485, and you can modify the baud rate, although all of the displays, with the exception of the P9, I think, are fixed at 9600 baud anyway, so it really doesn't do much good. Again, this is something that will probably change on future builds of the display. You know, when we go to change the serial interface eventually there. And we kind of already went through the tools, maybe not. So on the tools, along with the trigger variable, of course, we have the same buttons we had on the message editor as far as being able to add a message, delete a message from the queue, clear the queue, and trigger priority message. In addition, we can also set the serial address of the display or clear the display memory or set the date and time. So again, those were carryovers from the IMS software. As far as the PLC, again, you know, the communication between the comms module and the controllers really hasn't changed. It's still the same. And in fact, you can use the same add-on instructions. In fact, you can see here, if we pull up the PLC program on the controller, it should look very familiar. So we're using the same add-on instructions. Let me go ahead and turn on the PLC here. And it's going to be kind of tricky here. Let's go back to message 1. And you can see we switched to message 1. We can also go back to, I think I have one where I'm running a clock and pushing the value to the display here. Let me find that here. I think it's message 3. So here you can see the clock value change. This camera that we have on here kind of steals quite a bit of the bandwidth, but anyhow, you can see pretty much that none of that's really changed, the latter part of it. So really it's just the user interface and the hardware that's changed. So any questions? Sir? Let's see, what's next on the agenda here?
I apologize, Jeff, but I have a couple more here. In the
Sure.
old Inview, since it was a panel view, if both tags were not there, it did not work. Is that the same way with this? I haven't tested it, but in the other one, if both arrays weren't set up and actually configured, like most people say, hey, I'm not going to do variable, I'm just going to do message. They would only set the message, but they didn't have the. I'm wondering, is yours any different with the comm module? Hey, if I only had message, would it work, or nothing would work then?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I don't think so. I think it won't work on ours as well. But
okay.
I have to be honest. I haven't actually tried that. But I think they tried mimicking that part of the old comms module. So I know they were careful about, you know, allowing them to add too much of an offset and that sort of thing to the tag names. So, yeah, I would have to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure that's true. That it would not. There would be no communication between the Inview and the PLC in that case.
The other thing is that I had a call this weekend, but unfortunately, since I didn't have the screens up, I could only go by memory of what I played with in the previous weeks or months. And the one thing he was talking about, the guy was talking about, hey, I downloaded this AOI, but I see the AOI here. I seldom use the AOIs. I just tell them, hey, go into the tags, do the Control T1 carriage return, did it trigger a message? Good, we got it good going. this AOI only looks like it's an AOI to modify those tags, but the way the customer was telling me is, no, this AOI sends messages out like a quick on-the-fly message. I said, well, I'll have to go and look at that AOI to see if that's the case, but your AOI that you're showing us only has that.
Yeah, no, I think the one that you're referring to, and I forget what Rockwell called it. Again, we just kind of pulled this right off of a Rockwell knowledge base.
Okay.
I think there is one that allows you to basically push the message in its entirety, if they wanted to create and trigger the message simultaneously.
Right. I was pushing them towards just, hey, put just put in a variable on the background message, and then just update the variable. But he goes, he was pushing me towards this AOI, which I wasn't familiar with, so I was pushing in the other direction.
Yeah.
But
I mean, definitely.
Go ahead. No, I was just saying is that then we had even problems finding how to even configure a background message. I said, no, you go into the messages, there should be one listed background. I can't find it. So there must be in the message. I haven't looked at it for a while. Is there a place where it shows you where the background message is here?
Yeah. Let me go back to the editor here.
He had a hard time finding it. I said, put the background message up and then download that.
I mean, it should be
a variable.
Yeah, it should be the first message that shows up on the message group.
Right.
So,
like he had
right here.
There it is, BG. So I don't understand what he was having problems with. I was telling him, no, it's a background message. But he was having a problem even. I told him that I wanted to put just a big variable right in there, variable 1. Put one in there, and then that's all you have to do is do that. But he was going into the other direction where he wanted the on-the-fly messages.
Yeah, and the on-the-fly messages, I mean, I can see, in cases where they might want to use that, but, the other thing that's kind of negative about it is you're basically writing to the flash memory on the sign every time you execute one of those. And eventually, it's a finite number of writes to the sign. Eventually, you'll trash the memory, and it'll start doing funky things. So
are you saying that we should
well, this is, I mean, this is
the fly?
Like I said, I mean, there's a finite number of writes. It's probably into the millions. And again, this is on the sign itself, not the comms module.
Right.
So when they're constantly changing messages on the fly, eventually they will run into an issue where the flash memory on the sign will eventually stop functioning. In fact, I know we had a case, I think it was a Hyundai plant that we had to replace some motherboards on the display because of that. And they were doing that. They were constantly changing the messages, rewriting the messages. But, it took like 8 years before the board failed. So, I guess to answer your question, no, we don't point them away from that, but when somebody asks for that, I do mention that, hey, there's a finite number of writes, just so you're aware. Eventually you may trash the memory on the display. It may take years, but eventually you'll get there. So, anywho. Are there any other questions? I don't think we talked too much about what's coming up. I know I briefly mentioned 1.03. There's plans to change the LED behavior. We also plan on adding some features that will include, we are close to having a new display, an RGB display. It will be in the P94 package size, although it is a different enclosure. But that will probably be available sometime next year. The plan is to have those signs, at least protos, by Automation Fair. As far as the functionality of the sign, first out of the gate, it's basically going to communicate to the comms module the same way that we're communicating now. But eventually, we're going to do away with the serial interface and go to a DVI connection and give the user, more flexibility as far as what they can do with the sign. So starting with .03, we'll start to see some more advanced features. I know off the top of my head, one thing that they want to try to change is how the PLC communicates with the comms module. The thought was that we would have an add-on profile for the comms module, and they would just simply populate a tag for the address that they want, or the message that they want to display, and a trigger tag, and that would be all that they would have to specify. And then we could do away with the add-on instructions, and all of the T-frame and all of that would just be handled by the comms module automatically in the background without the user having to worry about it. So I know that's something we plan on adding in 1.03. I'm not sure if we'll get there all the way in 1.03, but that's the plan as it stands now. So.
Is there any considerations of at least even a test demo is like an offline software? Some of us don't have these boxes, or we're not by the box, and the guy wants us to walk through the user interface. Yeah. Oh man, I got to hook up is there any considerations, even if it was like a development, not to customer, even if it was a development, so we could walk through the screen configuration for this?
Well, we don't have anything like that. Yeah, we don't have anything like that now, but that's definitely a good idea. One thing we do have some modules and displays that we have that are accessible remotely that we could give you guys access to. So you'd be looking over a camera and being able to hit the actual comms module and that sort of thing. They wouldn't be necessarily tied to a PLC, but at least you'd be able to guide them through the UI and all of that. But yeah, I can ask the developers as far as, is that something that we can do? Is that a shortcut, or is that something that would take some time? Again, it's based on Linux. Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have that available now.
If you have that available now, where we can go to an Internet Explorer and go out to your site and log on to one, that would even be that's all we need is to.
Okay.
Like I said, I was with one customer. He couldn't even find BC. I would have had to, go to the lower left middle section. Do you see that thing called BG? That's the background message. But because I couldn't graphically image it, he couldn't, and it was as simple as what you see right now is right in front of his face.
Yeah,
but if we have that thing at those IP addresses, that would be good.
Yeah, we definitely have it. They're accessible through a webport VPN tunnel, so you'd be using the webport to get to them. But yeah, they're available. In fact, you'd be on the same unit that I'm on right now. So there's 4 of them on the wall that you would have access to. So.
Jeff, this is almost Angelo. I would have one of the same questions. The guy wanted to know how to trigger a message, so I was trying to get onto my module, and I couldn't get on.
Okay.
I could ping the unit, but the browser that we're looking at right now, it never came up. I reset the module, but it still doesn't work. What's my next step?
So you're still not able to connect to this unit?
Correct. I get the blue screen in the back there with the blue swirls.
Okay. Well, I would try a factory reset again, and I would do that right after power. So power cycle it, wait the 2 minutes. At the end of the 2-minute mark, hold the button down for 15, and then release. When you hold the button down, both LED lights come on solid red, I think. And then when you release the button, you should get one of them that blinks a rapid blink, and then the other one should remain solid green. But the rapid blink should be just a few seconds, and then that LED should go dark. If you see that, then it should be resetting to factory defaults, in which case you would wait again for the 2 minutes for it to reboot and all of that, and then try hitting it on the wide area network Ethernet port. If that process fails, just give me a call back, and I can try accessing it through a Linux prompt to see if I can figure out what's going on.
Does the browser need any special flash, memory, or anything?
We use Flash, so the browser would have to have Flash installed.
Okay, my
Adobe Flash.
Install Flash, and I did that, but still nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting the
when I first got the unit, so I know it works.
Yeah. I mean, if you're getting just the blue background, and if it's prompting you to install a Flash, chances are you're obviously probably already have Flash installed. One way to be sure would be to clear your browser cache and then reload the UI, and then at that point, if there's still an issue, what you'll get is a page timeout or just a blue backdrop. But you shouldn't see the prompt for the install Flash.
Okay. Is there any other troubleshooting tips we could use if that doesn't work before we could tell a customer, hey, this thing's bad, send it back?
Yeah, I mean, that one, again, it's tricky because of how the reset works. But yeah, the reset is basically was meant to be the fail-safe. So again, I would run them through that exact process where you power cycle it, wait 2 minutes, hold the button down for 15, release. You should get a rapid blink for a few seconds, and then you'll have only the one light that's solid green. At that point, you wait an additional 2 minutes. At the end of that 2 minutes, they should be able to access it through the WAN interface. I would say if that process...
Doesn't matter if there's two browsers looking at the same IP address, right?
No, it doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
You can have that. Yeah. So I'd say if that process fails, then I would say that there's something wrong with the unit. Short of going through and making sure that they got their PC in the same subnet and all of that. If it fails to recover after a factory reset, yeah, I would say that there's something wrong with the unit. Okay. Are there any other questions?
That process in a techno somewhere written up?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look. Yeah, I'll have to look and get back to you. Yeah. I know that there's some troubleshooting on the online help, but I went looking yesterday for a breakdown of the LED blink codes, and I didn't see that in the online help. So chances are it's probably not. So I'll tell you what, I'll just write up an email with the procedure and shoot it off to you guys.
Great.
Okay.
And Jeff, I'm sure you've asked this before, but the COM modules, we're only going to have Ethernet. So people with old DH Plus and remote I/O, they basically were just saying, hey, Ethernet, and that is it.
Until we extinguish all of what we have in stock with the other protocols, that's correct. Okay.
And the only question with that is that then the next step comes in, well, I'm on Windows 7 or I'm on Windows 8. How do I get it?
Yeah,
so
unfortunately with the old
that wall also. Yeah,
that one's a problem because Rockwell wasn't able to locate the native files for the IMS. So, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we had to figure out by reverse engineering what was there because we didn't have access to the source files. So, yeah, that's a problem. I mean, there's no way for us to update the firmware because we don't have the source files, short of redesigning the whole thing, which I don't believe we're going to be doing that. So eventually, when the stocks expired, the only option would be the Ethernet, the new Ethernet comms. So until then, I guess all we can do is push them towards, XP virtual machine. But yeah, that's definitely an issue, and unfortunately I don't have a solution. So, are there any other questions? Okay. So. Okay, so I guess what's the next one? 12:30, right? My time?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll just go grab something quick to eat, and I'll call you back at 12:30.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jeff. It was good info.
You bet. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 2 minutes.